Hello and welcome to Coffee Talk with Serge. I'm Audra Streetman, joined today with David Bianco and Shannon Davis. And Shannon is actually here all the way from Australia, which is how long of a flight?
14 hours plus 14 layovers hours? Plus like other flights. So tired.
Yeah.
So
like 3 weeks.
About 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And we are in Las Vegas today, which is very exciting. We're here for a Splunk event, which is why Shannon is in the US. And very excited. We have a lot of stories to talk about. First, though, I wanted to talk about Twitter. So that's a story I've seen a lot of talk about in terms of security news in the last week. And with this story, basically, Twitter is saying that in March, I think it's March 20th, the platform is going to remove the option of SMS authentication, so text message authentication for non-subscribing users. So Twitter has the checkmark subscription, the blue, Twitter Blue, I think it's called. And so everyone that's subscribed to Twitter Blue will retain their access to SMS authentication. But for anyone that doesn't pay for that subscription, they'll lose the ability to use a text message to secure their account when they log in. And of course, a lot of people on Twitter are about this, saying that, you know, SMS authentication is less secure than other options like apps and hardware keys. But some other people, you know, within the cybersecurity community were also pointing out that SMS is better than nothing, and losing this option could actually make a lot of accounts less secure if they don't take the extra step to put on an app or something like that. So I'm curious, you know, what your thoughts were when you saw this.
Well, I mean, one of the first things that I saw was actually not the Twitter announcement. It was all the people talking about the Twitter announcement.
Yeah.
And so originally I thought it was totally something different than it really was. Like, oh, you can't use 2FA unless you are going to pay. But it turns out like lots of people kind of jumped the gun and just like, I guess they read the headline instead of the details.
Yeah, amplifying the Twitter message and all the fear and everything else. Yeah.
But I mean, I kind of think it's a disappointing move, mostly because I think SMS-based two-factor is way better than no two-factor. And it's also way easier for non-tech users than Google Authenticator or YubiKeys or whatever. And so it seems like it's kind of a net decrease in the security level for non-Twitter Blue users.
Yeah. See, I was taking like even kind of like a glass half full or even silver lining approach to it, as well as maybe this will start getting people to look at those other methods as well, because we see so many, you know, fraudulent uses of SMS two-factor. It's like I said, it's better than nothing, but if this can maybe have some, you know, impetus to get people looking at, you know, hardware tokens or, you know, push-based, or even push-based can be bad, but still, I don't know. I like to be positive sometimes.
I just kind of think like they're just saying, we're going to take away the low friction, easy to understand and implement option. And the other thing is harder for you to understand and do. So it's most likely that, you know, people aren't going to do any kind of two-factor. But, you know, I don't know.
Trying to monetize. I mean, it's the whole thing is trying to monetize any of these things within Twitter to make back the 30, 40 billion or whatever it was. So I think we'll just see more of these things coming. Anything that they can monetize, they will.
Actually, I think it might be the opposite. I think they might be trying to stem the cost of the SMS messages that they're sending out for free.
Yeah, it does add cost. And it's also worth pointing out that 97%, more than 97% of Twitter users have no MFA on their accounts. So I think it's 2.6% is the percentage people have been talking about from a recent Twitter report of users that have a form of two-factor authentication. And of that percentage, of that 2 per 6, 3/4 use SMS. And I don't know how many of them are subscribers or not, but I agree with you, David, that a lot of people might just lose their MFA and not, you know, get an app because it's an extra step. And for people that aren't as security minded, I think sometimes in this industry, we can be like an echo chamber and very insular. And we forget that there are a lot of people.
So we're gonna see lots of moms and dads accounts being hacked and doing stuff.
I mean, it also, that's why the point is people that use SMS, it usually it works for them because, for their threat model, they may not be targeted in the way that someone that's more high profile who might need a YubiKey or something like that.
And just to argue against what I just said, which is going to be a theme for this, it's, we don't really have access to the data about the people who are using 2FA already. And of course, maybe we'll find out that the only people using 2FA were the people who are like us, and we are capable of doing the other kinds of 2FA. And so maybe it's not going to be an issue. I don't really know, but it just seems like it's a shame. If we want to encourage more people to do 2FA, taking away SMS-based 2FA, even though it's not perfect, it's way better than nothing. It's kind of a disincentive to encourage two-factor.
Well, I have to go turn my two-factor on my Twitter account now, so I think I always had that off.
So go ahead and do that, Shannon.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And I also saw that Meta is also rolling out a subscriber model for Facebook and Instagram, kind of following the Twitter playbook, and they're actually requiring multi-factor authentication for users who subscribe to those platforms. So I thought that was interesting, of making that a default.
Wasn't there MailChimp giving you a discount if you had multi-factor enabled on your account, which is kind of cool as well, kind of carrot kind of approach.
Yeah, I could see that being, or when you're going through the process of creating an account, making that more of something that you have to
front and center.
Yeah.
Okay, here's the importance of doing this.
Exactly, instead of having it be an afterthought or something that you only do when you are thinking about it. So, and it's an interesting story. I'm curious to see the impact. I know Twitter is one of the few social media platforms that tracks MFA use, which is something to point out as well. Yeah. But anyway, our next story is going to be Russia-Ukraine related. We're actually just a few days away from 1 year since the war began, and Google, Tag, Mandiant, and Google's Trust and Safety team released a report just the other day, just analyzing the conflict over the past year. It's changed the cyber threat landscape. So Google actually tracked nearly 2,000 instances of information operations that they were able to disrupt in the last year, which was interesting. And then Mandiant, they also observed more cyber attacks within the first months of 2022 than in the previous 8 years, just to put in perspective how cyber operations have ramped up since the war began. And I also wanted to talk about disruptions to the cybercrime ecosystem, because the report points out that a lot of ransomware operators or cyber groups that were previously financially motivated, some members have actually pledged their allegiance to either Ukraine or Russia based on the conflict. And they actually assessed that former Conti ransomware members are actually repurposing their techniques in order to target Ukraine. So, it's definitely, it's a great report. I recommend reading through it because it does a great job of outlining different stages of the conflict. And I know, Shannon, you do a lot of work with ransomware. So what do you think of that?
Well, it's interesting because seeing the operators take on different things. So there's operators that would have been Ukraine, operators Russia, and then seeing that split during this whole conflict. And some of them, like you mentioned, repurposing it for more, supporting their nation and doing things. So they couldn't work on the, ransomware operations, and maybe they take that, day-night moonlighting approach and can only get 2 hours of ransoming in a day as opposed to 8. But who knows? It's really hard to get an attribution on these things. It's tough, but we have seen that drop. I think that those phases, like you mentioned, and seeing the different things, wipers coming out, where we typically see ransomware, but they were about destruction at that point, as opposed to ransoming something they just wanted to destroy the data.
Yeah, wipers and DDoS too was something that we've seen a lot, especially with hacktivism. David, what do you think about the war?
Well, about the war,
about the war.
I'm against it.
Well, I'm glad we clarified that. But
actually, I have to say it's not really my area of expertise. So maybe I'm wrong, but when you said in the intro to this segment that the hackers are declaring their allegiance, it makes me wonder if they're really declaring their allegiance, or if it's really more like you will either do this for us or we're going to slap a rifle in your hand and send you out to the front.
Yeah, I mean, we hear about these ransomware groups potentially being either, possibly working in coordination with governments, or at least being shielded and protected by governments. So it's an interesting.
I think they're always like part of it. A lot of those ones that were, state-backed and state not sponsored, but I'd say tolerated. Tolerated. And now they're all great. You've already been doing this stuff for us. Now just going to shift over to the other monitor and start doing the stuff there. Yeah,
and there was that Mandiant report too that found potential coordination between hacktivist groups and the Russian government as well, which, at the beginning of the conflict, there was a lot of speculation, how will cyber play a role in this? And, those types of destructive, not Petya type attacks, we haven't seen anything to that scale. It's been more hacktivism, DDoS, and wiper attacks. So it's kind of interesting to look back and obviously the assessment from this report was that cyber attacks will continue, in the coming months. And there was also a report I wanted to point out from the Estonian Foreign Intelligence Service. They had a write-up that they released about the war, and they found, that espionage is likely the biggest threat in terms of, the cyberspace, and also that Russia underestimated Ukraine's cyber resilience as well, which, the assistance from Western countries has been worth pointing out too. So those are the two news stories for today. I want to talk now about our 60-second charity challenge, which I'm very excited about. We want to talk about the pyramid of pain because we have David Bianco with us. So of course we're going to talk about the pyramid of pain.
Or David will.
Yeah, or David, I guess let's start for people who aren't familiar. What is the pyramid of pain?
It's a PowerPoint.
Right.
I call it the world's most successful smart art. It's a model that maybe we can put this in do we have show notes we can put this in?
Well, I'm going to be talking about it during my thing, so I don't know if you give away too much.
It's a model for using how to use threat intelligence effectively to make your defensive cybersecurity, like detection and response efforts, more of an offensive effort to increase. Yeah, there we go.
There's the pyramid of pain.
Pyramid of pain.
All of us have stickers as well.
Yeah, we have stickers. I have one on my laptop here.
One of David's jobs is handing out pyramid swag.
Yes, I'm shamelessly promoting my own work everywhere I go, right?
Yes.
So anyway, that's it.
Okay, so that's the pyramid of pain. So I guess I wanted to ask Shannon to discuss the pros of the pyramid of pain, correct?
Kind of the pros, or take that, kind of positive debates sides.
Positives of pyramid of pain. And then David, you can talk about the cons of the pyramid of pain, or if there are any.
Yes. So this was only because I've been undefeated in the 60-second charity challenge so far, right?
I think you're going to keep that record.
So should we have David go first? Do you want to?
No, we should clearly be pro and then con.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'll start a timer as well. So Shannon, whenever you're ready.
Okay. The pyramid of pain is a prioritize their detections by focusing on the most valuable indicators of compromise. The pyramid is divided into 6 levels, with representing a different type of indicator. At the bottom of the pyramid are indicators that are easy to detect, but also easy for adversaries to change, such as hashes, IP addresses, and domains. At the top of the pyramid are indicators that are more difficult to detect, but are also very hard for adversaries to change, such as network or host artifacts, common tooling, or their own behaviors. It's a great model because it helps organizations learn and adapt based on the indicators they're collecting. By climbing the pyramid, organizations can improve their security posture by detecting and remediating more advanced attacks. For example, if an organization is only detecting the bottom of the pyramid, they may not be well equipped to detect advanced threats. To climb the pyramid, organizations can start by focusing on the lower levels and gradually work their way up. As they progress, they can implement more advanced detection techniques and hone their ability to detect and remediate advanced threats.
Wow, with 4 seconds to spare.
Yeah.
So did ChatGPT write that for you? I have to ask because I know.
I think maybe like 50%.
50%?
So
Okay.
Like I call ChatGPT Steve, so it's probably 50% Steve with maybe some Shannon sprinkled on top.
But what Steve wrote was actually hilarious because there were suddenly only 4 levels to the pyramid of pain.
And I had to build them up and help it. So ChatGPT, you can't really train in the traditional kind of machine learning training, but I kind of, influenced him a bit to get him up to the 6th level.
The other thing I thought was great was that Steve recommended that organizations start at the top.
Yeah.
Work their way down.
Yeah. Well, who knows? That could work.
We'll start with the most critical, but also most difficult things.
Yeah.
And then if we do that, hey, everything else, no problem.
4-year-olds can drive cars.
So now I feel like I'm going to flame out on the cons of the pyramid. I probably should have prepared cons of Steve writing about pros of pyramiding.
Yeah.
I would have won.
We'll have a session on that.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Whenever you're ready.
So you may have heard this saying that says all models are flawed, but some models are useful. Well, the pyramid of pain, while it is useful, is definitely flawed. Let me just say, first of all, the pyramid of pain is coming up later this year on its 10th anniversary of publication, which actually means it's older than a decade because I was using it explicitly. I created it well before it was actually published. So it's over a decade old. And how many things in tech do you think that have stayed relevant and correct for 10 years? Some, but not that many. Most of them kind of drift away. The technology leaves them behind and whatever. So there's clearly that, but it only has 6 types of indicators. What about like email addresses or email headers, or what about, and I also think like including hashes on those is a bad move.
Really?
So yeah.
Okay.
I'm over time, but I could tell you more about that later, but.
That is so interesting hearing from you about that, because, it is interesting that the pyramid of pain has stood the test of time, I think.
Just like IPv4.
I mean, it really has, but at some point I do know that it's going to
go its way.
Yeah.
Pasture.
Yeah.
Shotgun.
Where no, not shotgun. This is how they work it in Australia, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
You on your sheep ranch or whatever it is.
Yeah. Poor sheep.
I was expecting you to make a sheep
No,
noise.
not doing that, Audra.
No, he's all about the screaming goats now.
Yes. Well, I guess, am I choosing the winner?
Yeah, you choose the winner.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go with Shannon this time.
Thank you.
Not because David, you came up with the pyramid
Steve.
of pain.
Yeah.
So if anything,
Steve.
yeah, and Steve gets 50% of the credit.
Got a teammate.
Because, I think the pyramid of pain is a great framework, and it still applies. And it's interesting to hear your criticism of it, considering you made it.
I did literally nothing. Yay.
It's old. We're old, Dave. Should we be put out to pasture?
No.
Not the shotgun, no, sir.
All right. So Shannon will be donating to our charity this week, which.
Do we donate?
No. Steve.
Oh, no, you're
No,
going
I
to
don't.
donate.
Okay.
I do.
Thanks. We both donate. Yeah. I will if you want.
So since February is Black History Month, our charity this week is Black Girls Code. So that is going to be the charity that we're going to donate to. And I'll make sure to put a link as well with the on LinkedIn and YouTube for that charity. So now to our deep dive today. And this is an interesting topic. It ties into 2 recent stories, basically asking how much influence does the government have in terms of making an impact with ransomware groups, with hackback operations like what we've seen with REvil and Hive in recent weeks. And then also in terms of changing or influencing the private sector. So the President Biden's national cyber strategy, which we're expecting to come out any day now, we have some information about that it's likely to include a strategy to kind of shift responsibility for cybersecurity risk from users to technology producers. So that's one of the initiatives. So the question is, how effective can the government be with pushing for that? And then also the U.S. Deputy Attorney General, Lisa Monaco, recently said to reporters that law enforcement is going to continue targeting ransomware operators with sanctions, and then also those operations to take down their infrastructure. So what do you think? Is that something that is likely to be effective over time?
There's a few different things there, and I'd say sanctions and taking down infrastructure tend not to be super effective in the long run, because sanctions, the ransomware operator could just go change their name tomorrow and hey, they're not sanctioned anymore. And we see that kind of like evolution of these groups changing constantly. Like anybody that lasts more than 6-12 months is old in that industry. Taking down infrastructure as well, they're getting a lot better at having backups themselves. So they're operating as businesses. And I think that you take one thing down, it's going to pop up again tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of that kind of work, I think, it's necessary in terms of doing stuff against these people, but the effectiveness isn't as great as we think it could be.
Yeah, I mean, I do like the idea in theory of the federal government taking a little bit more active role, but yeah, I question how practical that is in terms of, yeah, they can do a lot of work. They can indict threat actors, et cetera, but does it really change the cybersecurity landscape for like an average consumer or even even a large business, an enterprise or something like that? I guess what details we have seen suggest that they would like to do more on the federal level to protect the state governments, which I think makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not sure. It's no matter how many takedowns they do, there's always somebody just coming in to fill that vacuum. As you were saying with the ransomware, there's actually a talk at the SANS CTI summit last month about ransomware gangs rebranding and how easy and how often it happens. So I can't remember the gentleman's name, but I think it was from GuidePoint Software. And it was a really great presentation. And that's exactly what I think of though when I think of this. Like they do a takedown, they name some names. They probably aren't going to actually be able to arrest anybody, but even if they do, the remaining people will just reform, rebrand. I kind of think it's the same thing with what we were talking about earlier with the Ukraine
Mm-hmm.
actors from Russia too. It's like, okay, well, same thing. It's like we'll find them, we'll identify them, they'll disperse and coalesce over here again under a different name.
When they take vacation to Mexico, is when we can grab them. But if they're staying in that little sphere, that there's no way to actually get the individuals.
Well, I can see what you're both saying about this, but I do think name and shame does have its place, right? Because even if you can't indict or actually prosecute someone, just by naming them and maybe even putting their photo out there, if they're a government-sponsored hacker, for instance, they might lose their value to the government. They might lose their value to whatever they're working on. And it also, I think, the more paranoia you can instill among these groups, the better, right? Like who's in our network, who's looking at our operation, how long? Because the FBI, they sat in on our evils network for a while, and the visibility that they gained from that, with Hive, they were able to see that only 20% of Hive victims reported attacks to law enforcement.
I would say, like, even beyond that is the reputation, because it's, again, the business side of these things, that the ransomware groups are up here and all the affiliates are below them. And if the affiliates lose, trust in that ransomware crew because of those sorts of things,
right,
that can directly influence their business model. And so that kind of thing, but that needs to be ongoing. It's
right,
feeding and watering the information campaigns against these groups. If you stop, then again, that trust and relationships.
But there's like an asymmetry there. Like there's so many different threat actors and potential threat actors out there that, like, even though we have a lot of people working on it in the U.S. government, I mean, they can't
keep up with it now.
Can't make a dent. But there have been things that the government has done in the past that I thought have been very helpful. And so maybe they could serve as a guide for the future. Like, for example, when the U.S. government started creating like legal cover for organizations to do intel sharing between themselves, like with the ISACs and ISAOs, that was super useful. And it's almost like what am I trying to say? It's a little bit easier actually, and requires a little bit less effort from the government to do that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And so I think the potential payoff is bigger. Mm-hmm. So rather than spending a lot of time, busting individual threat actors or actor groups, I would like to see more attention spent on the fundamentals of what can actually change. Again, pyramid of pain. I'm all about bringing the pain to the adversary, and definitely doing takedowns like that does have an effect, a reputational effect, and maybe I would like to think it would have like an effect of making the threat actors a little bit nervous about their chosen profession.
Right.
But I'm not sure if that's really the case. But I think it's less bang for the buck than other things. And I don't know, none of us has seen the details of the plan so far. We've only seen people writing about what they've heard about the plan.
Right.
So maybe there is some element of that in there that I'm not aware of. So I don't know.
Well, I think a lot of the talk to you about in terms of government influencing the private sector with products and vulnerabilities, it always goes back to the discussions about SBOMs and making sure products are secure when they're initially rolled out, and that people have better insight into what is rolled up into their products in terms of software.
It's
So
super difficult, and
Yeah.
it's a whole other kind of side to that. But it's, security has layers just like donkeys. So
And onions and ogres.
yeah.
all right, well, on that note, I think we're done. Thank you, Shannon. Thank you,
Thank you.
David, so much for joining. It's been great talking about these stories. And of course, we always want to hear from you. If you have any ideas for what you want us to talk about, or discussions for future episodes, just let us know. And starting next week, I believe it's March 7th, we'll start having episodes every Tuesday. So you can catch us 11 a.m. Pacific time, 2 p.m. Eastern on Splunk's YouTube and LinkedIn channels. So with that, we'll say goodbye, and we'll see you next week.
Goodbye.